Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and compare the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 13 mini and see which specific iPhone is the better one for you. Now, I will definitely tell you if you want to pick up either one of these iPhones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these iPhones, the interesting thing is the jump from a 13 mini to the 14 is not really that big of a difference from a 13 mini to a 13. So if you're debating between these two iPhones, you kind of have to ask yourself, would you go from an iPhone 13 mini to an iPhone 13? If the answer is yes, then probably it makes sense just to go to the 14, to be honest. But if the answer is no, then obviously the 13 mini might be the better one for you, if I'm being completely honest. I don't hate the iPhone 14s, and even the issues that they're having now will probably get fixed throughout time, but I just don't think they're that good of a value. I think the 13 mini might actually end up being a better value now, considering the fact that this is actually the last mini iPhone Apple is probably going to be making. Unless the next SEs, end up recycling this design, most probably the 13 mini is going to end up being the last mini iPhone, so that is a pretty big advantage for that device. There are lots of big iPhones you can pick up, but for the mini size, this is really the only option you have for the most part. Now, starting off with the price tag, the 13 mini costs $599 brand new to buy it from the Apple Store. The iPhone 14 costs $799. Now, the big difference here, in my opinion, is that the 13 mini has been out for a year now. So because of that, it's probably going to be much cheaper in the used market than something like an iPhone 14. So I say that to say, if you want to buy an even cheaper iPhone, then like I said, getting it in the used market, places like eBay, wherever else you can get it, that's going to be a much better deal for a lot of people out there than getting an iPhone 14 brand new. Now, on the outside, there are a few differences. The size is the big one, but the 13 mini has a 5.4-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display on the front. The iPhone 14 has a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. Now, both of these are at 60 Hz. So neither one of these phones have, a 120 Hz panel. They also don't have a removed notch. Like, there's no dynamic island on either one of these. The screen to bezel ratio is probably the same thing. It's obviously a smaller display in the 13 mini, but it's an overall pretty much the same type of build, the same type of experience you're getting between both phones. So there's really not that big of a difference between these phones at all. They both have lightning ports at the bottom. They both have glass backs, so the standard glass backs here. There is no frosted glass or anything like that. The same wireless charging, the same MagSafe capability, pretty much the same things when it comes down to both of these in the exterior right there. Now, we do have the camera setups as well. So we have the dual camera setup and the dual camera setup on the 13 mini. So pretty much the same exact thing between both. So let's go and hit on these specific cameras. Now, the iPhone 13 mini from last year had a wide-angle lens and an ultra-wide sensor, where the iPhone 14 has a wide-angle lens and an ultra-wide sensor. They're identically almost the same exact thing. They can do 4K at 60 on the front and the back, and they pretty much share a lot of the same similarities. There's few differences between here. Now, the main advantage that Apple kind of states here is that you do have autofocus on the front camera, which I don't even know. I thought the 13 mini already had autofocus, so that really isn't that big of a deal to me, obviously. And the iPhone 14 also has that photonic engine for incredible detail and color. That's what they state on their website. And I will definitely tell you, after using the iPhone 14 camera for a little bit of time, I honestly just don't see that big of a difference from the iPhone 13 mini. Still to this day, the jump from like a 12 to a 14 isn't really that big of a difference, but the jump from a 12 to a 13 Pro is a massive difference. And the reason for that is the additional camera sensors. Having that telephoto lens and having that ultra-wide sensor is really important. Both these phones lack that. So because of that, going from a 13 mini to an iPhone 14 in terms of the camera setup really isn't that big of a difference. For one, they have the same type of resolutions you can film in, the same type of camera, lenses, the same type of camera quality for the most part, and they both have cinematic mode. So that's really the main thing. The only feature the 14s have over the older ones is like the addition of cinematic mode, but both these iPhones have it. So that in and of itself, it's not that big of a deal. You do have this new action mode, which is cool if you're into it, but I just don't think a lot of people are going to be utilizing it. And until that's added in apps like Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram without messing up a lot of people's cameras on their iPhones, well then that's probably going to start becoming a little bit of a better deal, but I still don't think it's that big of a difference, to be honest. So if we're looking at just sheer the camera qualities, for me personally, I don't really think that would be one reason I would go and upgrade. It's probably better on the iPhone 14, but it's really not that big of a difference, if you know what I mean. So in terms of the camera setups, that kind of covers it up there. Now, some other key differences: the iPhone 13 mini actually has a SIM card tray within it, where the iPhone 14 does not have a SIM card tray. So that is another big advantage. If you're somebody who's even kind of contemplating the SIM card tray thing, you might just want to stick with the 13 mini for the time being. And in terms of software and longevity, I'll tell you, after installing all the iOS 16 versions on basically all the iPhones, no iPhone is perfect. There's going to be bugs and glitches on every single device, but because these two iPhones share the same exact chipset inside, I'm not too sure what it's going to look like for the future of these iPhones. Is the 14 going to end up lasting longer than the iPhone 13 mini? Is the 13 mini going to last as long as the 14? Like, who knows as at this point? But I will tell you is the similarities between these is insane. Like, the 14 could have been a 13S. It could have been something like that. To call it an iPhone 14, in my opinion, it's not really a big number difference, if you know what I mean. So I'll say in terms of longevity, they're probably going to be lasting around the same time. In terms of performance, this is also pretty interesting. They both have the Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it. Now, we are getting 1-core GPU extra on the iPhone 14, so it pretty much matches alongside with something like a 13 Pro. Now, we are getting, I think, 6 gigabytes of RAM on the iPhone 14. With the 13 mini, we were getting 4. So that might be one reason you would go and upgrade. But at that point, the 13 Pro might just be a better deal for some people, if I'm being honest. Now, with the 13 mini, I've had great performance for it for the most part. Really wasn't that big of a difference going from the 12 to the 13 mini, but I like having that smaller size in terms of performance. Now, there were a lot of other improvements that the 13 mini made over the 12 mini, which I was really happy about, but the 13 mini is still a very fast phone. Everything you'd want to throw at it, it's a very good performing phone for the most part. The iPhone 14 is also a very good performing phone, but I feel like everything I would do on a phone, like apps are becoming more and more optimized. Games, like heavy intensive games like Genshin Impact, all these games have graphic profiles you can change, so you can lower down the graphics if your game is being sluggish or whatever. So ultimately, it really means less like how good performing of a phone is or whatever, until we start getting split screen multitasking and full on applications like Final Cut Pro on our iPhone, things like that. Then we can start kind of getting a comparable reason of like, oh, we should go and upgrade because X, Y, and Z. Other than that, the phones are becoming so much better now that between a 13 mini and a 14, the performance is going to be so much identical. If you're going from a 10R to a 14, it's going to be a bigger difference. But between a 13 and 14, very little difference there in terms of performance. Now, battery life wise, this is actually a pretty big difference. This is probably the main difference I'd go from a 13 mini to a 14, or at least a 13 mini to a 13. And it's the battery life. Apple stated that you're getting 17 hours of video playback on the 13 mini, whereas on the iPhone 14, you're getting up to 20 hours of video playback. Now, that's a long time of watching videos, and I will say the 14 definitely has better battery life than the 13, the 12, the 11, and the 10R on iOS 16. Now, on previous versions of iOS, I would say it might have been a little bit of a different story, but I will give that to the iPhone 14. It's definitely a better battery life for sure. And honestly, when we kind of wrap up this whole entire comparison, I kind of do think that, the 13 mini is pretty much like 95% of what the iPhone 14 already is. It's pretty much the same chipset, same cameras, same styling. There's really nothing that the 14 has that the 13 mini already doesn't have, other than things like crash detection and emergency SOS mode, things that most people probably won't even use on an everyday basis, let alone maybe they won't even use on an every year basis, who knows. I do think if you currently own a 13 mini, I think it's just a no-brainer to keep that phone. If you currently don't have either one of these, if you're okay with a smaller size, then I would highly recommend buying a 13 mini. I think it's definitely the better way to go. But otherwise, if you have the money, go for the 14. But I would recommend just buying the 14 Pro as of that point. That's going to be a much better deal for a majority of people out there than the 13 mini in my opinion. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.